And now it gives me great pleasure to present our commencement speaker, Professor Kelly Sutherland, one of our dedicated faculty in the Clark Honors College and the Oregon Institute of Marine Biology. Let me tell you a little bit about Professor Sutherland. She is a marine scientist who studies the interaction between organisms and the fluid environment. She earned her PhD in biological oceanography through a joint program of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. Professor Sutherland's research and teaching interests frequently focus on the intersection of biology and physics. She primarily studies zooplankton and, in particular, gelatinous organisms that many of us call jellyfish. Through her research, Professor Sutherland hopes to work with engineers to design an undersea vehicle using bio-inspired design principles based on the jet-propelled jelly plankton she studies, which are some of the most efficient and maneuverable organisms on the planet. Professor Sutherland has had research grants from the National Science Foundation, the U.S.-Israel Binational Science Foundation, the Oregon State University's Oregon Sea Grant, and was recently awarded a prestigious Sloan Research Fellowship in Ocean Studies. In her personal time, Professor Sutherland enjoys running, taking family trips to the Oregon coast and to the Cascade Mountains, and, especially, dance parties on the living room floor with her daughters, ages 1 and 3. Professor Sutherland, our students have an invaluable teacher and mentor. I am honored to present Professor Sutherland as this year's commencement speaker. Professor Sutherland.
Thank you very much, Dean Hunt. I'd like to start off with a question. What good is a liberal arts education for a scientist? As an Honors College faculty member, I am the advisor for around 50 students. And this is a question that I get frequently from the natural science majors. What good is a liberal arts education for a scientist? Well, for the science majors out there, and that's about 40% of you, the fact that you're sitting here is a pretty good indication that you found some of your own answers to that question. But I can't resist taking this one last opportunity to assure you that you made the best possible choice in seeking a liberal arts education in the Clark Honors College. And by the way, the beautiful thing about a liberal arts education is that the skills that you've learned and that I'm going to describe apply to all of you, not just the science majors. Because it turns out that some of the most important things that you learned during your time in the Honors College and at the University of Oregon weren't in your major. Some of the skills that I rely on most as a biologist are the same skills that a lawyer, an architect, or a journalist needs. So what are those skills? Well, this won't be an exhaustive list, but I'm going to highlight 3: leadership, storytelling, and curiosity. Looking back at my own college graduation, I could not have predicted that I'd be standing up here giving you a commencement speech today. I didn't even know what I was going to do the next day. It's only now that I can see more clearly the skills that have become so valuable in my work as a marine biologist. I'd like to start by talking about leadership. And the kind of leadership I'm talking about is everyday leadership. Leadership that happens moment to moment. You may have become the de facto leader in a group project during a class, or even during a 5-minute group discussion. Most recently, I watched students doing this in a colloquium that I teach called Bio-Inspired Design, and some of you are out there today graduating. What does this kind of moment-to-moment leadership require? It requires listening to your peers and considering their perspectives. Leadership requires good communication. In my work as a teacher and scientist, I need to consider a variety of perspectives on an everyday basis. Why do I need to appreciate diverse perspectives? I study jellyfish. But the scientists I collaborate with are people. Over the course of my career, I've been bobbing around the Adriatic Sea with Croatian scientists, scuba diving in the Mediterranean with French and Israeli collaborators, and I've worked from a remote island off the Pacific coast of Panama. In order to work together effectively and accomplish our scientific goals, I need to consider both the scientific and cultural perspectives of my colleagues. Earlier this year, I was at a lab in Bergen, Norway, taking high-speed videos of jellyfish with Canadian and French collaborators. Each scientist had a unique scientific perspective and expectations for the project, as well as a different cultural background. To realize our scientific goals, communication and respect for a diversity of perspectives was absolutely necessary. This is leadership, and you will use it too, no matter where your career takes you. Another ability that you learned during your time in the Honors College is storytelling. What got me thinking about this was an article I read about a month ago in the New York Times. It was an interview with Barack Obama and Bryan Cranston, who you probably know as the actor from Breaking Bad, but he also recently played Lyndon B. Johnson in a Broadway play. And by the end of the interview, a famous actor and the President of the United States had arrived at common ground in storytelling. Both emphasize the importance of storytelling in their work. We do this in science, too. In my own work, sometimes the characters are jellyfish, but it's still storytelling. When you're doing science, it's important to choose the right method to collect your data, analyze it appropriately, and so on. But if you don't know how to tell a story about your results, the right people won't ever find out about it. It's not enough to just have some good results. You need to tell the reader about the history and the context of your scientific question, how the parts relate to each other, and ultimately, you need to give the reader resolution. What do we now know that we didn't know before these experiments were completed? And the story I tell varies depending on my audience. In my work on jellyfish propulsion, what I tell the biologists might relate more to the ecology and evolution of these organisms. What I give the engineers is a more specific application to designing jellyfish-inspired underwater vehicles. And what I give the public is a broader context that explains that jellyfish are some of the most efficient swimmers on the planet, and their simple yet elegant way of propelling themselves through the water has the potential to make our transportation systems more effective. So what you have with you as you graduate is knowledge, the things you know. But more importantly, I would argue, are the skills you have, the things you know how to do. Leadership and storytelling are two of those. You each have a different set of foundational knowledge, but what you have in common is essentially an intellectual Swiss Army knife. Leadership and storytelling are two of the tools. And that's a good thing, because carrying around a figurative backpack full of books, the things that you know, gets heavy. But a Swiss Army knife is lightweight and infinitely adaptable to different life situations and to different careers. So this speech turns out to be very little about science and more broadly about the liberal arts. And that's because your education, the skills you've learned and will come to rely upon, are universal. They aren't discipline specific. Why is it better to have that Swiss Army knife instead of a backpack full of books? Most of you will switch careers multiple times over your life. The qualities that employers value are the ones that you possess. There's good evidence for this. Take, for example, an article that appeared in Forbes magazine about a year ago that explored the critical roles that liberal arts graduates are playing in technology startups. Yes, you need people that know how to write code at a tech company, but you also need people that know how to read a room, consider a variety of perspectives, and understand what technology users want, And that's why tech companies are relying more and more on liberal arts majors. We've talked about leadership and storytelling. I'd like to mention one more thing: curiosity. This is something you came here with. All humans have it. But here you had the space to indulge that curiosity. Your thesis project was perhaps the greatest opportunity you had to explore your curiosity. Curiosity is absolutely what drives me in my own work. My favorite part of research is getting underwater and watching jellyfish in the natural environment. The myriad of forms and behaviors under the ocean's surface is mind-boggling. But it's not enough to simply be curious. It takes courage to follow your curiosity, and you can't be afraid to fail. I do things that scare me all the time. In fact, I'm getting to the point where I do things because they scare me. During graduate school, I found myself scuba diving in Antarctica, in the middle of a bottomless ocean at nighttime. It was very cold, very deep, and very dark. Conceiving of doing this was really scary until I actually got underwater. And then it was exciting, exhilarating. Just a couple months ago, I sent off a grant proposal about a new generation of underwater vehicles inspired by jellyfish. That was scary. When my peers read it, will they think it's brilliant, or will they think I've totally lost it? The thing is, when you take chances, when you follow your curiosity, you might fail. In fact, I guarantee that you will fail sometimes, and that's okay. When you stop finding things that scare you in your career, in life, it's time to try something else. Honors College graduates, you are leaders. You are storytellers. Indulge your curiosity and see where it takes you. Congratulations.